What's up, everybody? It is Izzy back again with another Q&A. Let's get to the first question here. Is it ever okay to go immediately to a bulk from a cut, or do you always need to spend some time in maintenance? You don't need to spend any time in maintenance if you're going into a bulk after a cut. Absolutely no benefit to that whatsoever, unless you're so hungry that you can't control yourself and you're gonna overeat. But otherwise, you don't need to spend any time in maintenance. The only time that you would need to spend maintenance after a cut is if you're planning to cut more weight and you have really high food fatigue, you're hungry all the time, bad attitude, poor training, etc. Having like 2 months at maintenance can reset some of those things and allow you to take off another big chunk of weight. But if you're gonna bulk afterwards, you do not have to maintain. Thoughts on DC training? That's a lazy question, but we'll do it anyway. DC training is one of the most proven hypertrophy programs of all time. It has more people that have used it and made gains on it than almost any other cookie cutter hypertrophy program out there, because it's like at this point 20 plus years old. That said, there's a couple things to be aware of. One, if you don't like failure training, psychologically it's just not a good match for you. You won't get enough stimulus out of one set because you're not pushing close enough to failure because you don't like it. So it's really best for people that can grow on very high intensity, low volume stuff. And that's just not a psychological fit for every single person. I'm reminded of when Jordan Peters put Sasan Harati on a low volume, high intensity program, and he made some of the best gains he'd ever made in his entire life. But the problem is that for some people, when you say, okay, we're going to do the exact same thing every workout, but we're going to add 5 pounds or 2.5 pounds. And every single time you're going to grind out RPE 10 sets every single set. What happened was, again, made the best gains of his life, but then he needed a 4-month break from training because the psychological fatigue that he built from doing that style of high pressure training got to him so much. And there's a lot of people who fit into that category. Secondly, I don't think it's great for like side delts and rear delts and arms. There's just not enough volume there. In fact, in most DC setups, there isn't even a slot for direct side delt or rear delt work. Not even one slot. Like the closest that you get is like power upright rows. So here's the thing. If you're someone who needs a ton of size in the major muscles, chest, back, shoulders, triceps, quads, you need muscle everywhere, DC training is awesome because you're going to put all your focus into compounds. You're going to put all your focus into getting strong on those as fast as possible. And nothing builds massive size faster than getting really good at compounds and focusing just on those compounds. So it depends on the person. Is monogenic / multifactorial obesity real, or is that just bro science? It's a very real thing, man. And I know that people in the fitness world absolutely hate this because they believe so much in personal responsibility. But the fact of the matter is that people have vastly different abilities to regulate their appetite. And the people that you see on like My 600 Pound Life and stuff like that, they can eat 6,000 calories in a sitting and not get full. And the vast majority of people who are not obese, it's not because they have some amazing self-discipline and iron will. The vast majority of normal people who don't even work out, who aren't obese, just get full faster. It's really that simple. Why do sumo deadlifts hurt my adductors and outer glutes? You're lucky I didn't just give you the Dr. Izzy T filter on this one and next you, because I can't see you sumo deadlifting from my side of the internet. Here's all I can really tell you. You have some sort of an injury to those areas. Overuse injuries are extremely common in the adductors and outer hip type area for powerlifters because they do low bar and sumo sometimes 3 and 4 times a week. Or the other thing is that you're using a stance or alignment that you do not have the mobility for. So you're jamming yourself into a position where joints are pressing into things. And that's about as scientific as I can get because I haven't examined you. I can't see your technique. I'm just 100% guessing, man. And this will always be my answer to any injury and pain questions, everyone. I just don't know. What split would work best for somebody who can only train Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday? Interesting question. So, I mean, you could train 4 days in a row. I don't like doing it because I don't train sub-maximally, so that just doesn't tend to go well for me. What I would probably do, again, keeping in mind my training style, is I would do an upper session, then I would do a lower session on Saturday. So Friday upper, Saturday lower. Lower with a heavy focus on quads and adductors, so it'll be a squat dominant leg day. Then I would take the next day, Sunday, off, and then on Monday, what I would do is another upper session with a back emphasis, so make that first upper session a push emphasis, and then do deadlifts at the very end of the workout and touch up on hamstrings as well. So it would be upper push emphasis, lower quad emphasis, day off, and then it would be kind of full body, but back emphasis with deadlifts and hammies. That's my best attempt at it for you if you're using a maximal training style. Tips for keeping your center of mass balanced when wearing Oli shoes. I really think you're overthinking this, man. Just put the shoes on and go do the exercise a couple times. Like, this is what you have a nervous system for. If you're not keeping your center of mass balanced, you're going to stumble and fall around. Like, you should be able to balance because you're a human being with a functioning nervous system. Just put the shoes on, do the exercise a couple times, and you'll eventually get the hang of it. Put it on and forget it. Does the serratus anterior get enough stimulus from pressing movements? Enough stimulus for what, man? Like, you really need to maximize your serratus anterior? That's not like a key muscle group for bodybuilding, powerlifting, strongman, sports. I think if you're doing free weight pressing, especially something like dips, and then that's probably all you're ever going to need to worry about this. But, you know, if you're also, you can throw in something like dumbbell pullovers or any other kind of pullover with the full range of motion, and that is going to be enough for the serratus anterior for almost all normal purposes in the lifting world. Do you have any experience with anterior shoulder pain? Personally, my shoulders never, ever hurt, but I find the vast majority of the time when someone is getting shoulder pain, it is because they have poor alignment or they're trying to access ranges of motion that they do not have. So look at both of those factors first. If you eat all of your carbs for the day before your workouts, is it better to overeat on your calories so you can have post-workout carbs, or skip the post-workout carbs? Honestly, it doesn't really matter when you time your carbs. Yes, there's going to be slightly better nutrient partitioning if you eat carbs pre and post-workout, but most forms of lifting are actually not that glycogen intensive. You really just don't burn that much glycogen. So assuming you get to eat the next day as well, you can just have, you know, some carbs on the next day, and that's going to be synthesized and used in your training anyway. And it's very likely that one training session didn't use all of your intramuscular glycogen in the first place. So I really wouldn't worry about this either way. If you accidentally overeat carbs one day and don't have any left for post-workout, just stick to your plan and do better next time. It's really not hurting you much at all. Are T-bar rows really mid-range biased? Or are they short biased since the upper back is exponentially weaker at the top? No form of free weight row is ever going to be mid-range bias, okay? The disparity between how much weight you can get to full scapular retraction and how much you can take to mid-range or just before the scapular retractors take over is a gigantic difference if you train both separately. And a good example of this would be if you take anyone pretty much that does super strict rows and you put them on a prime or strive row with all the weight in the lengthened bias position on the lengthened bias peg, more often than not, if they're doing it strictly and not launching and leaning back and that kind of a thing, they're going to fail in the shortened, even with the setting fully in the lengthened peg. So when you have something like a T-bar row that has a very slight drop off at the top, it's just less short bias. It's not mid-range bias. I have a free weight leg extension that gives me poor stimulus to fatigue ratio on a set to set basis. Should I do cluster sets, myo reps, or drop sets instead? So I'm assuming that you've already tried this and you found that it had a better SFR. You don't need anybody's permission to do something when you personally find that it has a better stimulus for you. This is one of the most frustrating things about the internet. Unless you're trying to build a system for hypertrophy that works for as many people as possible, or you're trying to write a textbook, it doesn't matter what works for other people. If you try something and your N=1 experience is, hey, this is better than what I was doing before, you don't need anyone's permission to do that. Just do it and reap the rewards of the better stimulus to fatigue ratio. Ladies and gentlemen, at some point, you just have to try things and then trust yourself. It's okay to trust yourself, I swear. Will doing glute work with a short bias interfere with subsequent leg pressing if it has an ascending strength curve, like the Cybex squat press or the hammer strength seated leg press? In my experience, yes, it will. You have to keep in mind, too, that if you're talking about like hip thrusts also fatigue your quads. So this will just depend on your priorities, and you'll have to try it and see exactly what happens. But I do think you'd run into a scenario where you'd be increasing the likelihood that your glutes would be the limiting factor before your quads doing leg presses after short bias glute work. So it depends what you want. When doing lat training, should you do mid-range bias work first or lengthened bias work first? honestly, unless you specifically have access to the prime pull down, I don't even think you have an option for lat work that has a true lengthen bias. For example, when I do the hammer pull down with the seat all the way down with a yoga block and a pad with straps, I still fail on the mid-range. I don't fail on the lengthened. It's not a truly lengthened bias setup because you need a huge drop from start to short to get a true lengthened bias. So I personally would just order this based on your priorities. In the past, I have done, for example, the hammer strength pullover, which is short biased, and then followed it up with the hammer pull down. And I found I got better net performance that way. But it's just hard to answer this in generalities. It really depends what you want. Are lower range of motion variations for bench press a good idea for increasing frequency inside of a block? So if you have a powerlifting client and you think it may be a good idea to increase frequency, you think it's something they may benefit from, picking lower range of motion variants that skip the fully lengthened can be easier to recover from, so it's less risk of them basically reacting poorly and not being able to recover from the frequency addition. However, keep in mind that if you're talking about something like a block press, once you start getting to like 2-board and 3-board, some people can actually lift more from a 2-board or a 3-board than they can from full range of motion. And now you're doing overloads, right? And those can be harder to recover from a central nervous system perspective. So keep that in mind. If you are going to increase frequency, it can sometimes be more important to use a variation that's harder and reduces the total load than it is to use a range of motion that has, to use a variant that has a lower range of motion. But of course, sometimes you can pick one that does both, like a spoto press. So yeah, it may be a good idea. All right, everyone, thank you for the questions. I'm finally caught up. It literally took me 3 full workouts to answer all of the questions from that one box. That said, a little update. Tomorrow I have an appointment with my orthopedist to discuss the results of my MRI. So tomorrow morning, first thing in the morning, 8:45 Eastern or something like that, I am going to find out whether or not I need surgery on my bicep. And once I find that out, that'll be sort of the falling domino that sets into motion my periodization for the rest of the year, whether or not, I need to take 2 to 3 months off to recover, or probably whether I shift into prep mode and compete. So I'll let you know tomorrow what the result is. I'm feeling a lot better than I was when it initially happened about the chances that I don't need surgery. But at the same time, of course, I don't want to get my hopes up and then get discouraged from bad news. Either way, it doesn't matter whether or not I need surgery. I'll attack the rehab aggressively in either scenario and make sure that I get healthy and get back to new all-time bests as soon as possible. But yeah, tomorrow morning I'll update everyone as to whether or not I need surgery. All right, so I just got back from the appointment with the orthopedist, and the amateur hour diagnosis was correct. It's a partial tear of the biceps tendon. However, with a partial tear, that could be anything from it's 10% torn to it's 90% torn. And in my case, it's more like 90% torn. In the words of the orthopedist, it's my bicep tendon is barely hanging on by a little thread, and that's why it didn't roll up into my arm completely. It definitely requires surgery. So he does surgeries on Wednesdays and Fridays, and I will likely be in not this coming Wednesday or Friday, but the next Wednesday or Friday is likely when I'll have surgery. And then from there, it's basically 4 months till I can even do like a 3-pound pink dumbbell curl. So long road of rehab and recovery ahead for me. And as far as what this means for like near-term and medium-term plans, I'm not really willing to make any commitments to that yet. As always, I appreciate everybody's thoughts, prayers, and well wishes. All right, everybody, that is the end of the video. So, as always, if you liked the video, please like the video. Questions and comments below. Subscribe if you haven't already. And have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye. Peace.